Hello, today I would like to introduce to you David Lurey. David has been teaching yoga since the year 2000, and he's often called a global yogi monkey because he has been in over 22 countries all around the world. He has already given lectures in over 108 yoga studios in over 80 cities. He's a passionate kirtan musician and combines 4 different yoga concepts to a holistic approach. Now based on the island of Mallorca with his wife Miriam Wagner, David is leading workshops, retreats and teacher trainings in Brazil, Europe and the US. David, welcome to the interview. Nice to have you.
Thank you very much, Merlin. Happy to be here, and you got all the points correct.
Perfect. Sounds good. Then I would like to start with the big question. What is your definition of yoga? What is yoga for you today?
The $10,000 million question. Yoga, in my perspective, has been shifting since I first began, when yoga was a physical exercise to do something with my body. That for me now, yoga is a representation of aligning my body, my mind, and my spirit in every possible way that I can, in everything that I do.
Okay.
And it's a lot harder than downward dog for 5 minutes.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sure. And how did you come there? What was your first introduction to yoga, and how has you been developed over the last years?
I was working as a food and beverage manager for the Hyatt Hotel Corporation in San Francisco, California. I was wearing a tie and my hair was more like this, and I had big visions of climbing the corporate ladder. And one afternoon, a wonderful man named Jamie Lindsay came to me. He was working for me as an employee, and he said, "Well, David, I'm doing a yoga teacher training program, and I need a student because my teacher wants me to find a very beginning student and teach a class to them. Would you like to do that?" And I thought, well, I think my mom did yoga in the 70s. Sure, let's try and check it out. And he was doing his teacher training in San Francisco at a place called It's Yoga, where a guy named Larry Schultz, who's famous for the sequence of yoga called the Rocket. It was power yoga. And so I went to take the class, and as cliche as it sounds, I lay down in Shavasana, and there was the angels singing and the lights flashing and the bells ringing, and it was one of those moments that said, hey, here's something important. So then I started practicing regularly. I was the bar manager and the nighttime restaurant manager at the hotel. So I was waking up at 10 o'clock in the morning and going to midday yoga. And then I would go to work from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 2 o'clock in the morning. And this was my cycle for several years. And then the story evolves. Should I keep going from there? It seems like, okay.
Yeah.
Then this was during the, let's say, 95 till about 2000 or so. And I was practicing a lot of yoga in San Francisco, and it was really cool. There were different studios with different scenes, and there was a lot of yoga parties, things like we would start the party with Tai Chi, and then do a yoga class, and then the DJ would come on. And we would dance till 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was getting involved at the Burning Man Festival, teaching yoga classes, at other music festivals, Reggae on the River, and things like this that were very much my lifestyle outside of the classical yogic approach, but very much in the California style of yoga. And this was, very much bringing the physical part of the practice, doing asanas, power yoga kind of stuff. And then slowly, the philosophy started to find its way deeper into my life. I've always been interested and open to alternative spiritual perspectives. I come from a Jewish family, but I've always, since my early teenage years, have been exploring different avenues of philosophies and ways of being a good person, which ultimately I think most philosophies are pointing us towards that, how to be a good person. So these things kind of unfolded along the way, and eventually over time I've been able to blend them to where the physical and the philosophical and the psycho-spiritual parts of the practice somehow find their way together.
Mm-hmm. And what is about being like a global yogi? I've read your figures that you have been taught in over 108 studios all around the world.
Yes.
This is pretty impressive. How does it come?
Yeah, it came in the, I guess, early 2000s after I had done my first teacher training. Some wonderful private clients of mine invited me to Greece to go come with them on yoga holiday. They said, if we pay for everything, would you come and make this our personal holiday? I said, yeah, sure. And when they were buying the tickets, I said, well, hang on. I'd be very curious to see if I could teach some workshops or something in Europe. I know a couple people through the Friends network, and they said, sure. So I was able to stay for an extra month, and this was in 2004. I stayed an extra month, and I taught my first workshops in Paris, Amsterdam, and Frankfurt. You see, and then I think there was a total of 20 students in everything, and all three of them combined. But it was I made some contacts, I made some connections with studio owners and some students, and there was an invitation to come back. And I worked it out. I went to business school, and I have an entrepreneurial mind. And I said, well, if I ask each studio to pay 200 euros, then I can buy a plane ticket, and we can make it happen. So I put my first European tour together this way, and then the same thing also happened in Brazil. I was the manager of a studio called Green Path Yoga in San Francisco, with a very good friend of mine, Clayton Horton. And Clayton, through the Ashtanga Yoga Network, had been invited down to Brazil, and he came back and he says, I've got something very special. A yoga conference in Brazil. Next year you're teaching there. So we went down together, and after my workshop, which was like 150 Brazilians in a room singing Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, it was a very beautiful moment. There was it was like my bar mitzvah. There was a line of people there waiting to give me a hug and say, wow, this was great. And in there was a man from Sao Paulo who says, I have a studio, would you like to come teach workshops? And another guy from Rio de Janeiro, and another one from Belo Horizonte. And so right away in around 2004, 2005, the traveling started to happen.
Wonderful.
And in 2006, the studio in San Francisco, we had to close because of our contract. The lease expired. And then both Clayton and myself said, well, okay, there's something for us here. And I just started traveling, and it really, the snowball effect.
Yeah, it's going to be
grows, and then it grows and grows.
Perfect. So you're quite experienced with yoga practices all around the world. Have you seen any differences between, I don't know, the European and North American style or something like this?
Yes, quite a bit actually. I haven't, although I am American, I was born in the USA, I haven't lived there in the last 9 or 10 years. So I'm a little bit removed from the actual part of it, but I do follow very closely on the internet, and a lot of my friends, I keep in touch with them about the American yoga scene. But I have a lot of direct experience within Europe and within Brazil in particular. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, that for me, my yoga practice is the union of the body, the mind, and the spirit. And the practice of yoga is pointing us to bring energy and evolve in whichever area is most necessary. So in Brazil, for example, there is a great amount of body awareness. If you see how they dance and how they walk down the streets, and Brazilians have a very physical nature about them. And the same is true with their we could say, divine connection and their openness to spirit. They're very believing in many things. They have their own religion, spiritism, and it's based on communication to spirits who are not in the physical world. And so they have this like physical part and this very spiritual part. And what I've seen in Brazil in particular is that the intellectual aspect of yoga is evolving and growing a lot. There's a big growth of Vedanta philosophy and integration of Patanjali Yoga Sutras and how to use the mind aspect to evolve in the consciousness.
Okay.
And then we jump across the ocean and you arrive in Northern Europe, which are very intellectually based cultures, and you know, thinking people who solve problems and you know, really can analyze things wonderfully. And what I've seen as the explosion of yoga in Europe is that it's a path into the body. So the physical part, the asanas and the pranayama and the things that get us into the body part are taking the intellectual strength of Northern Europeans and becoming embodied. And this awakens emotions and feelings, which is a connection to the divine. In the USA, and again, it's been a while since I've really had a first-hand experience, but I think that as a general rule, Americans have an okay sense of body awareness and mental capacity. This is clearly up for argument on many phrases, but the American way of connecting to God and to spirit has been lost. And so what I saw when I was there teaching and what's going on through my friends network now is that American yoga is somehow using the body and the mind as a tool to relate to spirit.
Okay.
So the different directions based on what is being called forth. Yoga knows which, you know, if this person or this culture is needing more intellectual stimulation, physical stimulation, or spiritual stimulation.
Okay, thanks for this input. It's very interesting to hear this. I've heard that you have like combined different yoga styles to some kind of holistic approach. Can you tell us something about this?
Yes, I'm a blender.
Okay.
Put the cocoa's milk, the couple carrots juice, and voila. I teach essentially 4 basic styles of yoga. There is Vinyasa yoga, which I teach for the connection to yourself. I've studied a few different lineages of Hatha yoga, from a more classical Ashtanga or an Iyengar lineage to very flow practices, and I've developed what I call my mindful spirited Vinyasa. It's Vinyasa yoga, movement and breath, but you do it for yourself. Then since 2006 or 7, I've been practicing acro yoga, done in partners and groups and things like this, where you're working with other people. So we take the personal practice and we move to interacting with other human beings. And it really calls up a lot of trust and a lot of communication and a lot of playfulness. And these are qualities that are important in everywhere in our lives. So then from the acro yoga, which connects us to other people, I'm very much involved with the green yoga movement. And this is something that I've been a part of for, again, another almost 10 years. That green yoga is honoring our reverence and connection to the planet. And it comes through asana practice, mantra practice, meditation practice, daily action through philosophy, of ways to honor the earth. It's environmental yoga from a few different avenues. So then we are connected somehow to the planet Earth. And from there, Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, is kind of right now the closest and the deepest roots in my heart. because this devotional aspect of yoga asks us to look beyond what we can comprehend in our minds and drop into the feeling of our hearts, where we can find a sense of interconnectedness between each other and to divine God nature.
Wonderful. And I also heard that chanting mantras is a big part in your daily life, let's put it like this. And I've heard that through chanting mantras you can reach higher energy, something like this. Could you give us some details between chanting mantras and energy frequencies and all these things?
Yes, sure. I mean, I can do my best. The universe is existing in vibration, and from tiny particles until the sun itself, until the feeling of love that appears in your heart when it appears in your heart. That mantras in particular have a specific frequency to them, a resonance. And when they are recited and repeated, the internal vibration of the mantra is like fine-tuning the frequency. I had a DJ friend in San Francisco who called himself a truth mechanic. So, you know, the mechanic like the one who fixes your car. So the mantras are like the mechanics of disharmonious frequencies inside of ourselves that come outwards. So as we chant mantra, we also awaken. It's hard to say whether it's higher or lighter frequencies, but they are different frequencies than, say, the feelings of heaviness and sadness. It's very interesting, though, to study this, because there are two sides to this. When we chant mantra and when music is part of our life, there is a lightness, and oftentimes can come a feeling of joy. But if we ignore the other side of life, which are our sadness, our anger, and our frustration, then we're missing half of the picture. So I view it like this, that life itself is going to give us the challenges of feeling upset and feeling frustrated and feeling angry and feeling sad. And mantra is the antidote, or the opposite side of that creates the light feeling. But it's important that we don't get attached to the joy and the happiness, because it's going to change. You know, in most wisdom traditions, we are taught to be careful of our attachments and our aversions, because they're the same thing. So we're attached to pleasure and joy, and we're averse to pain and sadness, but they are all part of the human experience.
Okay. So you talk a lot about the heart and the frequencies. So is it possible to, with these frequencies, to really heal your heart and heal negative emotions if you have some stuck in your body?
I believe yes. I'm certainly a big believer in this, that the cells of our body, the muscles, the bones, all of the physical composition of our body holds on to the history of life that we've been in. That you know, sometimes it appears like a physical scar if you did something in your physical body, and we also know that there are physical injuries that carry on through our lives. I believe that the same is true with our emotional scars, and potentially even with previous life scars that carry through these situations. So when we can recognize that we are holding on to these things, we also have the power and the capacity to transform them. It's not as easy as some of the books you would read would have you believe. Well, just think happy thoughts and everything's going to be okay. It's not, I don't believe it's that easy. That's clearly a very important switch to change. But ultimately, the healing that Miriam and myself, Miriam, my wife and co-teacher, who may be interviewed before or after me, whenever you watch this interview, we believe in and we teach that the healing comes from the feeling capacity.
Okay.
So at some point in our lives, we can remember a feeling of love, or a feeling of being confident to stand in front of people and deliver a speech or sing a song, or a feeling of deep compassion for someone who we have seen, we wish to support them. And this is where the vibrational field comes back into play, because the thoughts will work on our conscious level. I know that I'm talking to you right now through the computer, etc., etc. We have the concepts of the mind that can get us there. But that only gets us so far. And if we really want to create transformation on the cellular level, on the deeper than that, on the quantum level, we have to be working with vibration and frequency at a more powerful way. In this way, feelings have the capacity to transform and heal, because feelings work on the subconscious level. Thoughts are on the conscious level, feelings are on the subconscious level. So if we want to dig up the roots of our sad, broken heart, we have to replace them with feelings of love. Because if you have a broken heart, or if you're really sad, we have lost someone in your life, or something very tragic has happened, the feeling of sadness is there. And just saying, oh, I wish I could be happy, is still running around in the head. So there needs to be a clear, conscious effort to bring the feeling of joy, the feeling of relief. The ultimate is the feeling of love.
Okay, so you start with creating a thought who can create a feeling which together designs our reality, or because sometimes you just have a feeling, you cannot interpret it, you don't know if it's good or bad, you're struggling around with it. So how's the connection between thoughts and feelings? Which comes first, which influences the other one?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know necessarily that there is one clear answer. In my personal practices, I know that if I want to do my healing work, I have to engage my mind and think of someone or something that gives me the feeling. So, okay, I want to do some exploration in my heart. I think of someone that gives me the feeling of love. And so the mind has opened up the gateway to the feelings.
Okay.
But when I'm with my beloved, or I'm with a moment of life that presents me with a feeling, this is the right choice to make, this is not the right choice to make, the feelings are very clear, then the feelings have to communicate to the conscious mind, okay, I'm sensing this as a vibrational incompatibility. Now you do something and act in the material world to change the situation until the vibrational body feels at ease. So it's a two-way street.
Okay, very interesting. I also read that one big part in yoga is to understand the illusion of separation. I think in your texts it's mentioned a lot to find a balance and all these things. What is it about to understand the separation or the illusion of separation?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I believe that this is the root of almost all suffering in life, is the feeling of separation. Because we have this beautiful material body, the flesh and the blood that is my body. And it's different from your body, and it's different from her body and their body. And we have these physical bodies that, because of the illusion that we are separate, I see my body is over here and your body is over there. But I remember in my high school physics class, my teacher always once said, "There is never nothing in the universe." There is never nothing in the universe. So even though between me and you right now, it seems my eyes don't see anything, there are hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen molecules and particles vibrating back and forth, and we are in this sea of air that we don't see with our eyes. So there are things in between us on the literal, physical, scientific level. So then we say, well, if there is something at the edge of my skin that connects to the edge of your skin, there is a clear physical, albeit very microscopic, connection that's between us. The same is true that right now my voice is leaving. It's coming out of my mouth and it's entering into your ears. It's traveling through something. So on this very microscopic and even quantum level, we are existing in the same ocean of particulate matter, purely on the physical level. Then when we look beyond that, there are our emotions and the vibrations of them, and our thoughts and the vibrations of them. And the same way that I'm talking to you right now through Skype, which is a radio frequency, the same is true when I have a thought. It sends a wave out into the universe. Our brains are like giant microprocessors, and they send out these vibrations of frequencies, and we are constantly in them all the time. And there is never nothing in the universe. So my thoughts somehow interact with your thoughts and create our reality together. My emotions, when they are present, connect with your emotions in this way. And this is on the kind of esoteric, very out there level, which I love a lot. But on the more grounded level, if we look at all human beings, like our brothers and sisters, that we are connected in some way, then we can look beyond the physical differences. We can look beyond the cultural differences and even the belief pattern differences and realize, here is another human being doing the best they can to love and be loved with what they have available. And we all have different levels of our life experience. So even the ones that are dropping bombs and using the media and money as a manipulation tool, which I think is a very common thing these days, to use fear and manipulation to control people, I have to believe that they're doing the best they can with what they have available. So they are still trapped in this feeling of, well, I need something for me, rather than what is better for all of humanity and what is the best for all of the planet and all of consciousness. It's very stuck in a selfish way. So that illusion of being separate, I have to look out for me, creates fear, which leads to manipulation and control issues. On the inverse, when we can view life from a feeling of being connected, that leads to love, that leads to compassion, that leads to generosity. That, what can we do to support each other in growing and evolving in this way?
You were talking about consciousness. I think this is also like a part in your teachings, this yeah, awakening your consciousness. Is this one goal to reach, or is this like permanent, yeah, involvement?
Yes, yeah. There was a teacher of mine named the Green Sufi that talked about yoga as a practice of constant conscious inner awareness. Constant conscious inner awareness.
Yeah.
So rather than a goal or a destination, it is an ongoing daily practice.
Okay.
And some of my other teachers, Nikki and Eddie, wonderful teachers in Maui, Hawaii, they used to say all the time that the moment you think you've got it figured out, you better look again. So especially when it comes to consciousness, a lot of people are quick to wear it like a badge on their sleeve. Well, I'm a conscious, awake person. You know, we have to be very careful about what we put out into the world, and humility and awareness of you know, is everything we do a constant conscious inner awareness. When it is, then we can actually make a big change in the world. So for me, when I'm on my yoga mat and I'm doing postures and asanas, it's fairly easy for me to be conscious of cause and effect. What I'm doing, what are the effects? What is the action? What is the result? When I'm in my relationship, it's a little more difficult. Yes. When I'm wasting time on Facebook, it's impossible.
Perfect. So, yes, you talked about a lot about the spiritual and the emotional things, but how's it for you, just practical, physical appearance? How often do you train yoga per day? How many asanas do you do? Can you give the viewers a little insight about your daily yoga life?
Sure, for sure. I've been practicing yoga asanas now for 20 years. I started in 1995. And my first teacher, Larry Schultz, from The Rocket, when I did my first teacher training with him, he used to say, people who say they're going to do yoga every day are liars, and it's not realistic.
Okay.
Not realistic. Because we lived in San Francisco, and there was daily life, and there was parties, and there was banks, and you have to pay the rent, and you have to go to work, and things like this. So set realistic goals. And Larry says in the teacher training, no more than 3 days in a row without a practice.
Okay.
Because some days you're not going to want to do any yoga. Maybe 2 days come. Never more than 3 days in a row without a practice. So it's been now 20 years that I have not gone more than 3 days without a yoga practice.
Oh, wait. Well.
I used to be very intense about it, that a practice had to be 1.5 hours. And if I didn't do Surya Namaskara A or B or do something dynamic and power, it wasn't a practice. And then when I came into my family, Miriam has 2 beautiful young adults. We can call them children. They're 22 and 20 now, but they were 15 and 13 when I met them. That family life changed a lot of things. So rather than having 1.5 hours as my practice, I became a little more flexible with things. This morning, for example, my practice was 1 hour, which included 15 minutes of meditation, probably 5 minutes of mantra, and then asana practice. For me, I do a sequence that you can find on my YouTube channel and on my website called Rolling of the Joints. That opens up all of the gelenke, the articulations of the body. And this is something I do every day. And then my personal practice really changes based on how I've slept the night before, what I'm up to this day, things like this. So how many asanas and which specific asanas, it's very difficult to say, because I've become a lot more flexible mentally through my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say that probably 8 out of 10 practices include at least 5 minutes in Sarvangasana shoulder stand, because this is my favorite pose of the last couple of years. I just find something very powerful and releasing in my neck and shoulder. And my teacher Adil says that Sarvangasana is the physical training of the mind in the direction of the heart. So there's a physical response, and there's also an energetic piece to that.
So you're focusing more on your strengths when you do your asanas.
When I practice in the morning, yes. When I do my morning asana practice, it is a little more of a dynamic physical practice. And now that I'm together with Miriam for many years, and her passion and practice of yin yoga has rubbed off on me. So we also do evening yin yoga practices. I also love restorative yoga, and I'm very clear on the different impact between yin yoga and restorative yoga on my body. After I travel, I prefer to have restorative practices. And in the evenings, after like very stimulating days, I like to have yin practice.
Okay, it would be actually my next question, because Miriam told us a lot about yin yoga. Can you say that you're more the yang part when it comes to your yoga practices, or do you both trying to find a balance? Or?
Yeah, when it comes to asana teaching, especially when we are together, yes, we fit kind of into the stereotype, because she's a very nurturing, loving, cariñoso, maternal woman, and I have a little more of a strict disciplinarian quality to myself. When I'm teaching asana, and we could say more of a yang style asana, I like to think about intention, alignment, and action.
Yeah.
And these three pieces fit together, and the actions should fulfill the intention. So again, there's kind of a logical approach there, and this is how I like to feel and teach asana practice, which has a little more of a dynamic energy to it. That what is the intention? Why are we doing it? How are we going to align, whether it's the physical body or other pieces? And then the action. So yes, contract your quadriceps, descend the shoulder blades, all of the physical pieces of asana practice. I like to teach those, and I tend to have a little more of a better result teaching those than inviting people into their soft and sweet place of surrender.
I also read that you both have sometimes given a Shiva Shakti workshops. That must be a perfect combination with you two. What is this all about, a Shiva Shakti workshop?
Yes, yeah, the Shiva Shakti workshop plays on a few different qualities, like we've talked about with yin and yang, that with asana practice, the yin practice of being completely still, but then watching all of the movement around you. And then when we are in yang or vinyasa style practice, your body is moving all the time, but there is a sense of stillness, of the pure consciousness within. So we are playing on these two polarities in order to balance them. So they kind of cross a little bit because of the terminology. That yin and yang tends to be, yin is the surrendered passive practice. Yang is the dynamic active practice. And when we think about Shiva and Shakti, that Shiva is said to be the pure consciousness, beyond form, the essence of the universe and of life itself. And Shakti is the manifested world. It's constantly changing since the moment the earth and the universe have been around. nothing is the same. So when we are in the yin practice, the more surrendered state, we can watch all of the Shakti dancing around us. And when we are in the yang, the more dynamic movement, our practice is to be aware of the pure consciousness beyond all of the movement and all of the change. And to add even another layer onto that, we have the masculine and the feminine dynamics. So there are 3 different layers that we play upon in the Shiva and Shakti workshop of how to experience and cultivate balance inside yourself, because because my physical body is that of a man doesn't mean that I don't have feminine qualities, and I should avoid my feminine qualities. And the same is true for women, because you have a woman's body, that there are masculine qualities that are important when we live in the world. So we play on a lot of these different themes in this particular workshop, and honestly, just about everything we do.
Perfect. Very nice explanation. If someone asks you, like, David, I want to start with yoga, it sounds interesting, but I have no clue where I should go or how I should start. Should I do it alone? Should I go in a studio, buy some DVDs? What kind of advice would you give such a person?
Good, that's a great question. As a responsible yoga teacher, well, what I believe is a responsible yoga teacher, I would have to sit them down and ask them some questions. What is your intention for teaching yoga, or for practicing? So I said before, intention, alignment, and action. Same was true for everything I do. So what is your intention for practicing yoga? Do you want more energy? Do you want to help with your lower back? Do you want to become more flexible in your hamstrings? Do you want to realize God inside of your heart? And then based on what their intentions would be, then it would really be to find the appropriate practice. Because I know a lot of people that said, I tried yoga once, I didn't like it so much. Okay, what happened in the class? Well, we went and we sat on a cushion and we chanted Om for 30 minutes, and then we rolled around on the floor like we were a cloud. Well, there are other kinds of yoga. And the same is true for people who say, oh gosh, I would have loved to try yoga, but I went once and, I couldn't do anything. I was sweating and I was shaking, and we need to be really conscious of the fact that there are so many paths of yoga, and that I do believe that there is a practice for everybody. It doesn't necessarily fall into one of the categories of Ashtanga, Vinyasa, Kundalini, Yin, etc., but there is a yogic path that involves body, mind, and spirit for everybody. So it's kind of like customizing your diet of the food that you eat. A custom yoga practice is also better this way. That being said, you could also just recommend find a basic Hatha yoga class and go check that out, or find a yoga teacher that resonates with you, because the teacher makes so much of the difference.
Okay. Then I actually would like to ask you for one last advice. In my mind comes the question, how are you dealing with really negative thoughts during your day? You talked about a lot of thoughts and emotion, how all these are getting together. So I was wondering how you deal with it on your daily.
Yes. In the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, there's a lot of really great information there. And one of the sutras, I won't go through the Sanskrit part, but it says, when you have a self-defeating or a negative thought, think the opposite. It says this clearly in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras.
So for example, does this mean you should not give any attention to the negative thought?
Uh, this is a really great question because I think it's important that we explore the root of the negative thought.
Okay.
Because until we can pull out the root, there will still be something there. But to start with, in the very actual day-to-day basis, flip the script and think the opposite. Miriam is doing work with the Course in Miracles, and there are also amazing things in this book. And one of her phrases was, "I am determined to see this differently." And I've incorporated this phrase into my mind quite a bit. Like when I have a negative thought, and they come often, I'm a human being and it's stimulated from the outside world, I am determined to see this differently. And it doesn't even give the specifics of how I'm going to see it, but let's just flip this script and have a different conscious thought. So in the moment, I'm determined to see this differently and have a positive antidote, the medicine to the negative thought. And then in your meditation practice, or in my meditation practice, in my asana practice, in conversations with Miriam and my friends and my men's circle, it's like, how can I explore the roots of these negative thoughts?
Okay, very nice topic. I really love to talk about this. And yeah, also I think I'm done with all my questions. Would like to thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Very nice. And yeah, say hello to Miriam.
I will. Bye. She will be home soon. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.